I appreciate you being here this morning, particularly this morning because of the weather. And Bill Cook and Janice Bagby drove up from North Georgia and said it was quite interesting to navigate this morning coming in from there, and that's always more of a flood-prone area. But I appreciate you being here. If you will, turn over to 1 Timothy chapter 4. Look at a couple of verses there and, to kind of start us off. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. Paul tells Timothy, "But reject profane and old wives' fables, and exercise yourself toward godliness. For bodily exercise profits a little, but godliness is profitable for all things, having a promise of the life that now is and of that which is to come." What we're doing this morning is we're exercising ourselves to godliness. And I appreciate so many of you being here and being involved in this process. We go to the gym. Well, some of y'all go to the gym to get in better physical shape, and maybe you've got a personal trainer that helps you develop. And those are exercises designed for a purpose to strengthen and condition. What we're doing this morning is exercise. We are learning how to be better people when it comes to godliness and bringing up our families committed to Christ. And so these are important times. It's important for us to have our children here as well, so that they can see that we want to be a part of these things, to exercise ourselves to godliness. And we'll talk about that probably some more a little bit later. Joe and I come to this subject from completely different backgrounds. I was raised by Christians. I do not remember a time in my life when we weren't centered upon God and His things. That was what my parents were doing before I was born. My mother is a first-generation Christian. She obeyed the gospel. Her mother did later, but she was taught by a friend and became a Christian. That was probably in her mid-teens, something like that. My dad, best I can tell, was a third-generation Christian, meaning his grandparents were Christians. But my dad's father passed away when my dad was 3 years old, and his mother died when he was 15, and he was on his own after that. And so when my folks got married, they didn't have anyone to rely on for advice about how to raise kids. And of course, I didn't have any idea about that until years later, when you just think about, well, what was it like when my parents were the age I am now, and that kind of thing. And I think about the fact that my mother and dad made really good decisions early in life to be sure that my brother and I were raised in the environment that we needed to be raised in, and they were committed to the Lord. So that's my background. Joe, you want to talk about yours?
Sure. I don't know how many in here are first-generation Christians. I know there are a few. I was not raised in the church. I grew up in a broken home and didn't have a fantastic childhood, but I know many people are in the same boat, so I won't dwell on that. What I did not have growing up was a compass for spiritual matters whatsoever. I always believed there was a God, but we didn't focus on God in our home at all. By age 10, my mother and father had divorced. I grew up mostly a latchkey kid. And some of you younger ones may not know what that is. I left for school in the morning from an empty house. I got home after school to an empty house, and I didn't have a parent there to be with me. My mother had to work. Being a single mom, she had to work. So we didn't have a lot of money. I have no doubt my mother loved me. It just wasn't a great environment to grow up in. So after graduating high school and experiencing what I did growing up, I wanted a change in my life. I didn't know what that change was. What I did know is what I didn't want. And so the Lord blessed me very much when I met my wife, because after meeting her, I came to understand what I was looking for and what I didn't have in growing up. And so when Sandy and I were married, we weren't sure that we wanted to have kids. In fact, we were more focused on not having kids initially. But due to good examples around us, we decided that we wanted to have children. And I was determined before that decision that if I ever had kids, they wouldn't experience what I experienced growing up. I was going to break the cycle. And so that was my main focus, even before coming to know God, was to promise myself, to promise Sandy, that their kids would have a good home with a mother and a father, and that they would never have to go home to an empty house after school, that they could talk to their parents, that they could express their sorrows and their troubles, and that they could trust that we cared. So it was later on, a couple years later, I obeyed the gospel, and then I came to the full knowledge of what I was missing growing up. And that only made my resolve stronger to raise children in the Lord.
And so it's interesting that we come at this from two completely different backgrounds, but when we approach this subject, we're perfectly aligned. And it's because we have the same guide, the same manual for life. And so it was interesting talking about our backgrounds with each other and talking about our approach to raising kids and the things that we did. The one thing that we agreed on was that lots of prayer and our good wives are the reason that our families are what they are today. I think we played the lesser role in all of that. I think we agreed on that. But, it's just so important to work together, husband and wife, as a team, be completely aligned on the same goal and the same mission for our families. And we'll talk about that some more. This morning, this is kind of going to be our outline. We've kind of already done a bit of this introduction, but we want to talk about God's success plan that He gave. We want to then talk about how we implement being committed to God's plan into our families. And then we'll talk about the vision for our family. And then in a suggested outline that Byron gave us, one of the points he had was, what would you change if you could, or what would you have done differently now being where you are? And we'll talk about that just a little bit. And then just a general Q&A. So we want participation this morning. We want you to ask questions during all of this. But at the end, if we haven't covered something that you want to talk about, then please bring that up and we'll talk about it. We don't really have a time limit on this. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this on Saturday morning. We're not going to go all day, though. There's a limit. And if we do end up going long enough, we may just take a break and let people go to the bathroom or whatever. But anyway, we'll see. So let's talk about God's success plan. Let's do a little bit of reading. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 6. And somebody who has that, read verses 1 through 9 for us, please.
Now this is the commandment, and these are the statutes and judgments which the Lord your God has commanded to teach you, that you may observe them in the land which you are crossing over to possess, that you may fear the Lord your God, and keep all his statutes and his commandments which I command you, you and your son, and your grandson, all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. Therefore hear, O Israel, and be careful to observe it, that it may be well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord God of your fathers has promised you, a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Thank you, Keith. What's the context for this passage? Where are we in Israel's history?
Moses repeating and giving the sense and concepts of the law before entering Canaan.
Yeah. And so they are on the east side of the Jordan, on the plains of Moab, ready to cross over and take the promised land. And Moses is giving this series of lessons or reminders, whatever you want to call it, to the people of Israel, to tell them how to be successful when they go in and get this land that God has promised to them. Somebody read verses 20 through 25 for us. We're going to come back and comment on these things in a bit.
When your son asks you in time to come, what is the meaning of the testimonies and the statutes and the rules that the Lord our God has commanded you? Then you shall say to your son, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. And the Lord showed signs and wonders, great and grievous, against Egypt and against Pharaoh and against his household before our eyes. And he brought us out from there, that he might bring us in and give us the land that he swore to give our fathers. And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as we are this day. It will be righteousness for us if we are careful to do all these commandments before the Lord our God as he has commanded us.
All right, so we've got this generation of people that's fairly young, because what happened to the older folks? They all died in the wilderness, didn't they? Because they rebelled against God. Moses and Joshua and Caleb are the oldest people in Israel. These three men, the rest of the folks are 40 and under. And, well, maybe not 40 and under, but anyway, they were 60 and under because they wandered for 40 years in the wilderness. So this is an exciting time in Israel's history, right? It's a new generation. It's these people are more committed to the Lord, and they're getting ready to go in and take the promised land. Now, turn to Judges chapter 2. Judges chapter 2, and someone read verses 7 through, I want to go down through 12, 7 through 12 for us.
So the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Now Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died when he was 110 years old. And they buried him within the border of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres, in the mountains of Ephraim, on the north side of Mount Gaash. When all the generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation arose after them who did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done for Israel. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals, and they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were all around them, which they bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger.
So, what is the time difference between Deuteronomy 6 and Joshua or Judges 2? And it's an approximation. It's not. We don't know precisely.
A generation.
A generation? Yeah, it's probably around 70 years or so. Not long. About 70 years. So go back to Deuteronomy 6, and we want to ask a question here. And that is, what instruction does God give in Deuteronomy 6 that helps prevent Judges 2? Verse 7? Okay, that's great. Hold that thought, and let's go prior to verse 7. Verse 7 is telling us to do what? Teach who? Our children, yeah. But what comes before teaching children? That's right. He tells the parents several things there, doesn't he? What are the things that he says to them? What are they to do? Yeah, verse 1, observe this. Commit yourself to the Lord. That's the first thing. We have to be committed as parents, don't we? Joe's fortunate that he met Sandy and he learned the truth, became a Christian, and is where he is today. What happens when parents don't follow the Lord and serve the Lord? What's the likely outcome for their children? Not going to be successful, are they? They're not going to be Christians. And what if you come to church all the time, but you're just sort of a half-hearted Christian, just attend on Sunday, and how are your kids going to turn out? They're going to be really, really strong Christians? Probably not. Probably not. What are the other things that we see there? So they're to observe the things. What else?
They love the Lord their God with all they have.
Yes, it is not enough to keep the commandments. We have to love the Lord. And so when we're talking about committing our families to the Lord, our children have to see that we love the Lord, don't they? That has to be evident in our life to them. It's very important. What else do you see there? What about verse 2? Yeah. So what's the difference in fearing the Lord and loving the Lord?
Intertwined a little bit, but the fear of the Lord is that you don't want bad things to happen. You're concerned about what will happen if you don't keep His commandments. That it's intertwined with the love and respect that you should have, which makes it easier to keep those commandments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments.
Right.
It's very simple.
Yeah, very simple. It's what Jesus said, isn't it? And so, yeah.
In that, we're talking about early childhood and then growing up. I remember when I was a child, I thought my parents were the best thing ever. They were never was gonna, if I did anything wrong, I was scared of my dad. And my mom too, she wielded a hairbrush. But a lot of motivation of doing the right thing on my part. I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew out of that because later I knew their commitment, at least at that time. And I wasn't motivated by fear. I was too big for my dad. It really hurt me. But I wanted to do the thing that was right because I love it,
Yeah,
not because I was scared.
right.
This too is the starting point in maturity. Fear of love.
Yeah.
Think about the point. Yeah, we fear hell.
That's a good initial motivator, isn't it?
It's a good initial motive, but then now as you mature, you want to
Yeah, love and respect and reverence him. That's right. I remember when, you know, those of you who know my son Jeff, you know what size person he is. He'd been that size for a lot of years. I remember one time in high school, he had done something, I don't remember what it was, but his mother was not happy. And I was sitting at a distance looking at the two of them, and here's Nan, and she's just looking up at him, and she's talking to him, and that finger's going, and he's looking down on her. And I thought, man, if it weren't for the respect that he has for his mother, he could just take her out, nothing flat, you know? And the reason that didn't happen was because he respected her. He wasn't really afraid of her at that time, but he was listening because he had a lot of respect for his mom. And so we do grow into that, don't we? And now, Jim, let's get to verse 7. What do we do?
Shall teach them diligently to your children, shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, now.
Yeah. Somebody said one time that this was the refrigerator passage. This is the stuff you stick on the refrigerator, you know. And it says here that, where is it? I thought it said you shall write them on your.
Verse 9.
Yeah, verse 9. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on the gates of your house. He said today people just put them on the refrigerator, but the point is, have the Word of God in front of your children. So when do we teach our children? Always? Yeah.
It's a part of your everyday routine, and it permeates the other things you do that would seemingly have nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And so it's when you're sitting down, when you're walking, when you're lying down, when you're rising up. It's just a continual presence of the Lord in our life, isn't it? That's really important. Joe, you got anything to add to that?
No, I just, looking at it from the perspective of a parent, every moment can be a teachable moment in some regard. And whether you're voicing it, whether they're observing you, just be careful of what you say and do in front of your children. And, you know, for most people, that's not an issue because in their actions, they're always seeking to serve and glorify God. And so when your children see that in you, they see that example, then those moments, they come more frequently. You can take opportunities to observe things in nature or in humanity and see things that you can talk about with your children and teach them, you know, how God would feel about situations, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So there's opportunities more than we take advantage of.
Right. Why do we expect that our children are going to either go to school or be homeschooled, however we choose to do that? Why do we have that expectation? It's the law, okay? There's one reason.
We uphold it, like parents, we make them,
Yeah, we make them, but why do we make them?
they need to learn.
They need to learn, don't they? If they're going to be successful in life, they've got to develop some knowledge and skills and things like that. And so we see to it that they are exposed to what they need in order to be successful in this life. As parents who are people of God, we've got to see to it that our children are exposed to the things of God as well. And so school's important. Schooling them in the Lord is far more important, because we're not just preparing them for a career, we're preparing them for eternity. And that is the ultimate goal. And so this is something that is intentional on our part. It doesn't just happen. We don't just find out one day when our kids are teenagers that they have an interest in the Lord. No, we start that interest in the Lord from the very first day. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Anything else on that, Joe?
Well, it's just a reminder of how sobering the passage we read from Judges is, that apostasy is one generation away.
Yeah.
And if we fail our children, we fail potential generations of family.
Right. So when it says there in Judges that there rose up a generation that did not know the Lord, what happened?
Well, the rest of Judges, they gonna spiral out. It's gonna get real bad.
Yeah. Yeah. But how did this generation not know the Lord? Parents. Parents did not do their job. And it is amazing to me to see what can happen in one direction or the other. I don't want to be saying something I shouldn't say here, but I think Joe said it already. His parents didn't raise him up in the Lord, but he was fortunate to find someone who taught him about the Lord, and he has changed. You even said you wanted to do that. You wanted to break the cycle. How many times have we seen Christians who one or the other of the parents decides they're going to, say, step out on the family, and then they split the family? And how many times do we see kids in that situation who become less dedicated to the Lord, maybe even walk away from the Lord? And then you've got generation on generation that come after them that don't know the Lord. It is so important what we are doing as parents. We are shaping the future generations. Sometimes we want to figure out what big thing I can do in this world, when the biggest thing we can do in the world is just to raise our children to be people of God. That's the biggest thing we can do. What did God tell Adam and Eve to do in Genesis 2? And I'm not talking about tend the garden.
Fill the earth.
Be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. They were supposed to replicate themselves and fill the earth with people like them. How were they made? In the image of God. That's our goal, is to bring up people who are living in the image of God. And we can fill the earth with people like that. Anyway, other comments before we move on? Any questions or comments? All right. Psalm 127:1 says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it." He goes on in that passage to talk about parents raising children. Interesting, the connection that's made there, isn't it? All right, how do we implement this commitment to God's plan. I'll ask you that question. How do we implement this plan?
It starts with ourselves, right? If I'm not doing what I need to do, then I'm not going to be a positive influence on my kids or my wife or anything else. Certainly not the world around me either. It's just like if I don't do it, everything else that should happen as a Christian is not going to happen.
Right. Right. Yeah, our own example is so important. How many of you older people have these moments when you stop and think, man, that is so my dad or so my mom, what I just did? Does that happen? All the time. Sometimes it's good, right?
Well, I'll just say unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But our parents have a huge influence on us, and it's more evident the longer we live how much influence our parents had on us. One of the things I find, my voice is just getting weaker and weaker the longer I live, and that's exactly what happened to my dad. And I'm noticing that it's happening to both of my boys. I don't know, it's just, I guess, part of our physical makeup or something. That's not training or anything, but it is because I am my father's son. But we find ourselves behaving like our parents. And so when we realize that our parents had such an influence on us, we have to realize that we have the same influence on our own children, don't we? This commitment to the Lord ideally begins before you're ever married. And I'm talking about within the family now. I know that we make a commitment to the Lord to become a Christian, but I'm talking about really this commitment about how we're going to raise our families committed to the Lord. It begins ideally before we get married. You should have conversations about what it would look like if we get married. How will we structure our family? What will we do with our time? These are conversations that we need to have before we get married. And we need to be sure that we are aligned. God says through Amos, talking to the children of Israel who are being rebellious, he says, can two walk together unless they are agreed? In other words, he can't go down the road with Israel because Israel isn't aligned with him. Well, it's going to be difficult for us in a marriage to go down the road together if we're not aligned in what we see down the road for our family. And so it's very important. Let me talk to the young people right now. When you're thinking about girls or you're thinking about boys and you're thinking about the future one day, you want to be sure that whatever girl or boy you're interested in is aligned with you in your values. If they don't have the same values you do, you need to find somebody else. And keep this in mind. I heard a guy say this one time, and it seemed like such a duh thing, but it was a really good point. We have a tendency to marry who we date. Isn't that right? That seems kind of a duh. You're going to marry who you date. Well, if that's the case, then you better be sure you date the right people. And when you find out that that person you're dating isn't aligned, that doesn't need to be the person you continue to date, regardless of your feelings. Okay? That's so important. So before we even get married, we need to be aligned with one another. We need to talk about what things will look like, what our commitments are. I remember these conversations with Nan, and one of the things that drew me to her was every time we would bring up one of these things, well, what do you do about this? What do you think about that? We were so aligned on things. And I knew that if I married Nan, we would we would be successful as a family because our goals were the same. There were no competing, she wants to go one direction, I want to go another kind of thing. We were completely aligned on the things that we wanted in our life if we were going to be married.
I was thinking about a visual illustration for this thought, and I keep going back to a three-legged race where you and your partner have one leg tied together. And if you are not aligned, if you are not walking together, working together, you will go nowhere. You will stumble, you will fall. There is no way to cross that finish line unless you are aligned with one another.
Mm-hmm. And so, some people come at all of this kind of after the fact, right? They've already gotten married and then they've become Christians or whatever, and so they've got to figure all that out at that point. But ideally, it starts before we ever get married, if we can take it back to the best point in time, right? But whatever the case, once we learn to serve the Lord, we need to be aligned with our spouse on what we're going to do as far as bringing our family together and serve the Lord. Joe, you want to take this next point?
Sure. We're going to talk about the different roles here. Let's say roles of husbands and wives. We've got some passages here. Could somebody turn to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, and read through verse 28? We could go from 22 through the end of the chapter as well, and I have a short point to make on that. So somebody's got Ephesians 5:22 following through the end of the chapter. Please go ahead and read that for us.
Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by washing with water through the word, and present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands are to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they fed and cared for their body just as Christ does the church. For we are members of this body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband.
So, as a younger Christian, before children, it was kind of a moment where we would laugh a little bit reading verse 22 about, wives submitting to your own husbands. And, obviously, the greater responsibility here lies on the husband. So as you read through this passage, what is the word telling us to do as husbands here? I'll ask for feedback on that. What are we told to do here?
We play the role of Christ in a relationship, that we are to be initiating that and going out of ourselves and pursuing them. I think kind of odd, and I'm not sure how to apply it, but calling to cleanse and sanctify them. That's sounds hard.
Well, it's promoting purity in the relationship and things like that. But yeah, the greater responsibility falls on the husband here, and we'll see that throughout many of these passages here. The husband, he needs to know his role. He needs to actively participate in his role. Oftentimes, you'll see families where this doesn't happen, where the husband abdicates his role as the spiritual leader of the family, neglects teaching his children, and the family suffers as a unit through that. So, any thoughts on that?
It's done with an iron fist is detrimental. You know,
Yeah.
making the general statements to the wife, do this, do that, to the children, do this, do that. It's not done as it should.
Yeah, if the wife is to submit to the husband has a responsibility for creating an environment where the wife can do that and wants to do that. Doesn't need to be one of those, woman, I said, you know, that's, if that goes on, that's a problem. We need, as husbands, to create the environment that is conducive to our wives being able to be in their role.
So that's why I wanted to read through the end of the chapter, and as a warning to the men, the husbands out there. Verse 33, it says, however, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. I'm telling the husbands, act in a manner worthy of respect of your wife. You can't demand respect. You earn it through the actions and the way you treat them, and the way they see you following the plan that God laid out for you as a husband. If they see you acting as you should, they will have no problem following the pattern set forth in the Word here.
And if there's strife in that relationship, the kids will know, and it has an impact on them. And so we have to be really, really careful how we do this. And again, going back to the first point of being aligned, so much of this is far easier when we know before we ever get into the relationship that we are aligned on the direction we want to go. As much as possible, let's get to that point. Go ahead.
All right. Anything more on Ephesians anybody wants to go over? We can move on. Our next passage on the overhead is 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. If we can get a reader for that, please.
Wives likewise be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives, when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle, quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. For in this manner, in former times, the holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good, and are not afraid of any terror. Husbands likewise, dwell with him with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered.
Thank you, Mark. So, verse 1 here, I really take this verse to heart because when Sandy and I met, I was not a Christian. And I fit this passage extremely well. I wasn't crazy and wild, but by her conduct, the way I saw her live her life, she won me over and opened my heart to receiving the gospel. So
That's a wonderful blessing.
it is, indeed. What about this adorning, this idea of adorning, the way the woman is told here to present her adorning?
Emphasis is definitely on inner beauty, conduct, as you talked about. Attitude, demeanor.
that can be very, yes, please.
The contrast being made between the effort that goes into your physical beauty, that's not your emphasis as a godly woman. Putting all of your time and effort into looking outwardly beautiful, but spend that time adorning a gentle and quiet spirit that will be pleasing to God, and that's what your priority ought to be.
Thank you, Jesse. Yes, we are going to read into this a little deeper, a little later on in the lesson as well. Bill?
There in verse 7, it talks about this working together of husbands and wives, where, the husband is to dwell with them according to understanding, honoring the wife. But he says there that you are, this is a partnership, not just a physical partnership, but a spiritual partnership that we are in with our husbands and wives, between our husbands and wives. And we are heirs together of the grace of life. My wife is helping me go to heaven. I hope I'm helping her go to heaven. We are heirs together of this grace. And if there's friction, if we're not aligned, then one of the consequences of that may be that our prayers can be hindered. How would this misalignment in our marriage present a problem for our prayers? Got a misalignment in our marriage and God's just not going to listen to me? Is that what we're talking about?
It distracts you from the purpose of what you should be doing. And the distraction causes you, I think, to drift away from prayer and not be consistent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what you're thinking about.
If you have an argument with your wife, you think you could just turn around and pray to God right then? Does that? Yeah. Well, you should, but I will tell you that it doesn't lead you to a prayerful position, does it? It hinders your prayers when you have this misalignment. Austin?
He's specifically mentioning the power differential. And so, there's a whole lot in scripture about justice and you abusing your power over somebody, and it's pretty hard to beg God to take care of something in your life or right some injustice in your life while you're oppressing your wife.
Yeah, very good point.
Let's move on to 1 Timothy.
Yeah.
So, the role of the husband. Now, we do have many who have both husband and wife working. But what does it say in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8, primarily in regards to a husband's role here?
But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
So what's that telling us?
That we have a responsibility, especially as the man of the house, that we will do all we can to ensure that our family is taken care of in whatever means they need.
So it doesn't mean just laying around and taking a life of ease and leisure because you
Playing
have
video games?
Yeah, video games because your spouse, your wife is making all the money and coming home and cleaning the house and doing all the housework and pretty much living a life of a retiree at age 25.
So being a spiritual leader, being a provider, and then
All right. Do you have any more comments on Deuteronomy 6 and 7, Bill? You had that on the.
Well, you take Deuteronomy 6 and 7 that we read about the teaching of the children, and then you go to Ephesians 6, verse 4. Who do we find out who has the primary responsibility in that role? Fathers. Yeah. It is the father who is instructed to bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Does that mean the wife doesn't have any responsibility? Obviously not. But the responsibility of seeing to the spiritual training of children is the father's responsibility. Now, obviously, the wives are going to be involved in that. And I will tell you that in our home, Nan stayed home, I worked. She did the training. I mean, I had a part in that, but she did the training. I didn't abdicate my responsibility to her or to them by having her do that. But had she stayed at home and all the kids did was play games all day long and videos and stuff like that, and there was no spiritual training going on, whose responsibility is it to see that that changes? Mine, right? And so the father has the responsibility. It's like the CEO of a company. CEO is responsible for the company, but he doesn't do everything. But he makes sure that it all gets done and done right. And that's exactly where the father is in this role of the spiritual training in the house. He needs to be sure that it's being done and being done right. Doesn't have to do it all. He's going to do some of it, but it has to be done and done right. And so we'll get into more of that in a bit. We're just talking about the roles right now. So we have to be aligned. Then we have to realize what our roles are, and then in the next point, we need to talk about when the children come. There are decisions to make. Do you have anything else on that previous point?
No, we're done.
Okay. And so we just got some questions here. I don't know, can you read those okay from the back? It's really small. Maybe up here it's better. But you got questions. And it's not necessarily right or wrong answers, but they're questions that you need to consider. When the children come, will the wife work?
Is this a loaded question?
Well, and it is not, the point is not whether or not it's right for the wife to work. That's not really the question. The question is that what you want in your family? Is for the wife to work, or is she going to stay home with the children? That's just a question you need to answer, and you need to know about that before the children come. Nan and I, before we ever married, talked about this. And as we realized that we were probably going to get married, we talked about whether or not she would work. And our commitment was that when the kids came along, she was not going to work. The only problem we had was that every one of our kids was an accident, and we had that first child, Joel, before we thought we were going to have kids. Going to work, and when we realized that she was pregnant, we both looked at the situation and wondered how can we do this. And so we had told my mom and dad. We drove down to Alabama to tell her parents that we were expecting. And I remember telling her dad that we were committed to having Nan stay home and not work and raise the kids, but we were really wondering how we were going to be able to do it. And he said, well, if you're going to have to live on one income when this child is born, you better start living on one income now. That was really wise advice. And we took that to heart. And we decided that we would take Nan's check and we would put it into the savings account and we wouldn't touch it. And we were going to live only on what I was making. And the first couple of months was tough. Nan was making 49% of our income. We got rid of a car. We got rid of a subscription to the newspaper. We got rid of some subscriptions to magazines. We got rid of cable TV. We cut down to the bare bones to be able to keep that commitment that we had made to each other. It was a sacrifice is what it was, but we were determined that that's what we were going to do for our family. I'm not saying that's what you have to do for yours. I'm just saying that that was our commitment. But that's just the story about how ours kind of came along. But that's a question that you need to ask, will the wife work? And you need to discuss that from the standpoint of what you think about is best for your children. As for me and my house, we decided that Nan wouldn't work, and I'm really, really thankful that she didn't and that she was home with our kids all the time. It's just a blessing to us.
Yeah, in our introduction, I spoke of my upbringing and how adamant I was about being able to support my wife to be a full-time mom, because I do believe that is a critical job. It's a lot of work, and very little recognition or reward for the hard labor that those mothers put in to raising their children. And so, as I said earlier, I was resolved to make it a point that my wife would be there for my children when they left for school, when they came home from school, whether they were homeschooled, whether they were in charter school. It didn't matter. They were always going to be able to go home to their mother to be able to talk about their day, things of that nature. And that's where I put a lot of value into raising our children, was she should be at home with them, knowing that, well, I didn't know what I missed because I never had it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
There's something was missing.
absolutely.
And I can say the same about coming home to an empty house. I always felt like the parent needed to be there. It's a balance.
Yeah.
Whether mom is working or dad, a balance.
And I know some of you have made sacrifices along those lines as well. And you've made those decisions for what you believe to be the good of your family, the good of your children. And I commend you for that. But that's a decision that you have to make for your family. It's one of the questions you'll have to ask. Any comments or questions on that?
I think
That's okay. Go ahead, Jesse.
I think it's good to have conversations before you have kids.
Yeah.
You also need to realize you don't know what you don't know. Before you have kids, you can have a lot of ideas, but until they come along, you don't really know how it's going to work out practically. So you always need to be talking to each other. Is this still working for our family? At this age, is this working for our family? Maybe there's, like, our priorities are the same. We have the same goals. Are we on the right track? And, different ages, your children might have different needs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always important to keep track with each other and make sure that you're on the same page and things are working the way you thought they would.
Yeah. It's not a once and done, right? It's a continual process of evaluating where you are and what's working properly, and are we reaching the goals that we want? Dee, you forgot?
You guys spoke generally about why it's good for our parents to be in the home, but can you go into more detail about that? And why it's good for someone to stay home?
For me, being in that situation, going home to an empty house, and not have any background with spiritual matters, things of that nature, I'd get home and then I'd immediately take off to go play with friends and things like that. I had a lot of fear in me, like our brother was talking about earlier. So I never really got myself into trouble. But kids can get into trouble when they're at home alone. And I mean, things happened in my house as well. My brother and I, we were 2 years apart, and we would get quite physical, wrestling and thrashing through the house. And I remember on one occasion, my brother decided he was going to skateboard through the house, and he went through a glass top table. And so that's just personal experience. But more importantly, just having somebody there for the kids when they get home. They have a lot to say if you listen to them. And they got a lot of mind on their mind. They have a lot of trouble, a lot of problems. One of the things I was going to talk about a little later on, but I'll bring it up now. The kids need to have confidence that you'll listen to them, that you'll communicate with them, that you care about the things they care about. And it tends to get pushed aside if both mom and dad are working late hours, they get home. What the kids get, what my wife got oftentimes, because I would work multiple jobs, was she would get tired Joe. She didn't get the best of me at home, and the kids also didn't get the best of me. And, it's something I'll always regret. But it's just better for the kids to have someone there, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people would feel the same way. Bill?
There are influences being exerted on your children all day long. And for us, we wanted to be sure that we had the majority influence for most of the day. And so we felt like that was best accomplished if Nan was in the home. So that at least at the point when they got into school and when they came home, they would have that period of time from then until they went to bed with one or both of us. And we had that opportunity to influence them. But if we are waking them up and taking them straight out of the house and either sending them to school or sending them to daycare, and they don't come home until 5 o'clock in the evening, and we have to put a meal together, and when they're a little older, we have to do homework, and then we put them into bed. When are we spending this time with them, listening to their needs, talking to them about spiritual things? Because there's only so much time in a day. And so, for those reasons, we wanted Nan at home to have the maximum amount of influence possible. I mean, one of us had to work. You can't support a household without an income. And so we did that. We made that decision that I would be the provider, since 1 Timothy 5:8 says I'm to be the provider. And we had her stay at home with the kids.
I don't think you have to be any kind of a specialist or an expert to realize that a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old child left to their own devices for a few hours is not a healthy thing. I mean, even if they're shy and don't get into any trouble, leaving them alone is going to create a sense of abandonment. It's not a healthy way to raise a child.
Yeah.
And even if you have arrangements where they're with a sitter or aftercare or whatever, that's just not a good situation for children to be in. They're under the influence. I think what you was getting at is somebody who, most likely these days especially, is not a Christian and doesn't have the same values.
That's right. That's right. So when we got married, we moved into a duplex, and a couple of months after we got into that duplex, the other side of the duplex became available. And so we talked a couple into moving in next door who were members of the church. And for about 3 years, we lived next door to each other. Those were some great years. We had kids about the same age, everything. It was just really great. And so after their first child was born, and and I think after Joel had been born, because they were close to the same age, she was still working. And so she and I were riding downtown together because like us, they didn't have a lot of money and we were trying to economize as much as possible. And so she was riding and I was taking her to work and then I would go on to work. And then we would go in the afternoons and pick up her daughter from the sitter. And I noticed something was happening, and that was that the child wanted to be with the sitter and not her mom. She was constantly crying that her mother was taking her away from the sitter. And it was tearing up Judy. She couldn't bear the thought that this child wanted to be with her sitter more than she wanted to be with her. And she then came to the realization that she was spending more time with the sitter than she was spending with her. And that's why the child wanted to be with the sitter. And she made the decision, talked to her husband about it, and they decided that she would quit work. And like us, they lost a lot of income. But Rachel, today, the little girl, is a wonderful mom, married to a wonderful man, raising wonderful kids. And I believe it is because her mom decided to be the majority influence in her life. Was there a comment?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I do think it's worth just bringing out that there are some things with our current day in which there are many different types of work situations.
That's right.
That didn't exist in some times past, and that there are real. I 100% agree that it's a sacrifice no matter what, and it's a sacrifice we've chosen to make, and luckily we've been blessed that it hadn't been much of a sacrifice, to be honest. But that I do think there are many ways and so many different ways nowadays to make it happen where you do still have that presence when you're in a stage of life where you do both have to or both have to at some level, or that's the choice that you're making one way or another.
Right.
But I will say, even with that, a point not mentioned yet, just as far as what are the benefits there, and I know Melissa and I saw while she was still working part-time after we had kids, it wasn't that William ever, he wasn't ever even not being taken care of by us even, but it was just the overall strain on the family, just to get the logistics of the family done week to week. So much effort and strain into that alone.
Yeah.
That's honestly the biggest piece for us, because we would have only done it in a way where we could be happy with how much time that we had exerting influence. But the big thing is just that the strain of logistics, I think.
Yeah, that's a challenge, isn't it?
Christine?
Sorry, I have one more. I just want to sort of leapfrog off of Jesse's here. You really don't know what's going to happen, which is why these conversations are so important early on, and then continuing through marriage, because things change. You do not know what's going to happen. And it's the intentionality part, which is exactly what is shown to us in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, it doesn't say, raise your kids well. It says, you need to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. You need to write it on your doorposts. You need to write it when you are walking and moving through your day. Because it is your heart that is going to help determine those relationships around you. So I just, personal experience, I had the pleasure and the gift of having both, right? I had times where we gave up everything. I was the 90% wage earner in my household. And we had a child, and Mark got a different job, and we decided, so our income was cut to 30%. It was a nightmare. But I was never happier because exactly what I wanted at that time and in that moment. And God works things out. I mean, that is one gift you get. I'm telling you, when you make these decisions, you will see amazing things happen in your life that you never would have expected. But down the road, there was a situation where I was no longer hungry. And I had skills and education and a career well before I was married, and I was able to pick up the slack. But we together had to make some very strong intentions about how are we still going to put the Lord and raising our children first. Even though we were both working very hard and we're both really tired, and I loved what I did. But I have to confess, there were times when I walked in the church building where I felt judgment and guilt for loving my job and being good. So that is not a condemnation. It's just something I wanted to say out loud, so that we really remember that the intentionality is what God asks for. God asks for our intention and our heart and our soul. And then everything else, we kind of have to work it out. And He's really sweet. He works out for us.
Yeah.
That is my intention.
That is the amazing thing, isn't it? That's the amazing thing. We probably need to move on a little bit here. So, how will you teach your children? That's a question you need to talk about in your families. What does this teaching look like? We never had formal times when we did Bible study in our home. In other words, it wasn't like every night after dinner, we're going to study our Bible for an hour or whatever. We just never had that. Looking back on it, I feel like we should probably have had some more times like that than we did. But what we did decide was that every moment, as Joe said earlier, is a teaching opportunity. When your kid comes home from school and complains that there's a bully that's giving him a hard time, you can console him, you can get sympathetic with him, that kind of thing. But you can also talk about how should that child be acting instead of the way they are. Why is what they're doing wrong? Talk about that from the perspective of God's teaching. Talk about how we respond as children of God to someone like that. It doesn't have to be a formal Bible study. It's just an opportunity to talk about the things of God. One of the things that I always enjoyed doing was taking the kids outside on a dark night, put a blanket on the ground and just lay there and watch the stars. You'll see a meteor. Every night you'll see a meteor. There are eclipses. There are just all kinds of things in nature that you can see. They're cool, but we don't look at them just because they're cool. We look at them because they're teaching opportunities. Somebody years ago talked about looking up at the stars, and she told her grandchildren that those were Abraham's stars. And I thought, so cool, because you can go back to that passage and you can read about God taking Abraham outside the tent and showing him the stars of heaven and saying, if you can count these stars, that's how many children you're going to have, how many descendants you're going to have. And those stars that we look at are the very same stars that Abraham was looking at when God. Not a formal Bible study, but still a teachable moment. There's so many times like that. talking about that bully, or wasn't necessarily a bully, but it was a nag. Jeff used to come home and complain about this young man that just wore him out at school, challenging his beliefs, challenging the clothes he wore, challenging decisions that he made about movies that he wouldn't watch. I mean, this guy was just all over him about this stuff, and it just drove Jeff crazy. And I just kept telling him, you've just got to live the way you're supposed to live. You got to respond the way you're supposed to respond. You don't know when that might make a difference. Later, that young man became a Christian. And he went to Jeff and he specifically apologized for those things that he had done to Jeff. And now Jeff and Matt Richmond are good friends. And I don't know whether it was Jeff's influence that made a difference or not. But if he'd reacted the wrong way to Matt, if we hadn't talked about the way that God wants Jeff to respond to Matt, then Matt would have seen a side of Christians that, or he would have thought of Christians in a different way than he should have about Christians. And so, again, that's another teachable moment with our children, to help them respond in the way God wants them to, but to be an example too to others. Comments on that?
Very similar to what you had commented on as far as designating hours for Bible study and things like that, which we did not do per se either. Some of it was self-inflicted, and the fact that I had to work multiple jobs. And there were times I didn't know, and I still don't know the things my wife does. She does so much behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But we always made it a priority when serving the Lord to make sure that they understood that we were blessed to be able to go to services, to church, to have the congregation, to have the fellowship with our brothers and sisters in Christ. So a lot of examples, and that was always a priority in our life. You know, they knew if Sunday was coming around, they were going to go to services. They didn't do it grudgingly at all. That wasn't a problem. Wednesday night Bible studies, things like that. I mean, we had, you know, family prayer, thing like that. But, you know, we just, because of my work schedule, we weren't able to designate time. And those are things I regret, you know. And they were, quite frankly, some of them were self-inflicted, which we'll get into in a little bit here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's, you learn. You hope you learn. So.
Can't remember, what does that say? Yeah. In addition to teaching, how are you going to discipline your children? You know, you need to be on the same page about that before the kids come along. Because if you, Dad, decide you're going to take matters into your hands with this child who's just acted out, and Mom doesn't agree with the way you're going to do that, and then the two of you get at each other in that situation, what does the kid decide? Pit them against each other. It's to my advantage to do so.
I do want to say one thing that I thought Tom always did very well was, and I did, was he always said, don't double team them in discipline. You know, if I made a decision, he stuck with it, and then he expected me to do the same. And so I always thought that was good.
Yeah.
Don't double team.
Yeah, as much as you want to talk about this before the children are born, when it actually happens and you're in the situation, sometimes what you've discussed goes out the window. And so when it does, some advice that we got was, when the event is over, you take your spouse aside and you talk about the situation and you decide how we're going to do this in the future, because we didn't follow what we agreed tonight, you know. And so that's very important. But how to discipline your children. Discipline there's so many different ways that you exercise discipline with your children, and it's both positive discipline and negative discipline. In our culture now, corporal punishment, spanking, that sort of thing is a big no-no. I will just say this. The Bible speaks of using corporal punishment on your children. Do not rob yourself of the tool, one of the tools that is in the arsenal of tools that the Lord has given you for raising your children. Spanking is not the only tool. It is a tool, and use it wisely. Sometimes you just can't get through to them any other way. Sometimes spanking just doesn't even work. Joel was always into stuff. And so one night I'm walking by the bathroom, he's in the tub, and I look in there and he's got the shampoo bottle and he's going, drain's been pushed and it's going down. He's just watching the shampoo swirl down the drain. I went in there and I grabbed the shampoo bottle away from him and I said, we don't do that. And so a few nights later, I pick him up and I pop him good. And a few nights later, and I'm getting ready to spank him again, and I'm realizing that didn't help. So then I just hollered at Nan, and I said, how much is a bottle of shampoo? She said, $3. I got him out of the tub, I dried him off, I said, we're going to your room. Give me $3. Well, Joel loved his money. And he reluctantly handed over the $3 for the shampoo that he had pushed down the drain. And he never did it again. So there is not a one-size-fits-all tool. You have to have a variety of tools, but you need to talk about how you're going to discipline your children. It's a very important topic that you must discuss before they come. You've got to be aligned on that one for sure. Any comments on that?
You discuss it before you have kids, and then once that first kid comes along who is completely different than what you thought that child was going to be, then you keep discussing it, and then when the second one comes along who is very different from that first one, then you continue discussing it, and it may be different for every child, but if your end goal is the same, and if you're communicating with each other and also with the children, this is why we're doing this, this is why we don't do that, then it works out a lot better than we decided that this is the way we discipline all of our children at the beginning and we try to stick with it. That's just going to cause strife.
Yeah.
With everyone.
You've got to learn that child and what works for that child, that's for sure. Joel was a strong-willed child. He was our first, and he was a challenge. We got through Joel and got to Jeff, and Jeff was pretty good, not a big problem. 7 years later, we have Jennifer. Jennifer was born saying, thank you, please, no ma'am, yes sir. She would put herself to bed, and so we thought, man, we're pretty good, And then Julie came and reminded us that it had nothing to do with us. Julie was our second strong-willed child and probably stronger than the first. So yes, it is, every child is different. Every child has to be dealt with in a different way. But you do need to have those conversations ahead of time. There are certain things that are going to be out of bounds, certain things that we want to be sure we do.
So even though I don't have kids of my own, I'm at the age where
You're the perfect parent.
But I do have friends that I've known for a while who are having kids now. And some of my friends, her daughter was always misbehaving, and she couldn't figure out why the behavior wasn't changing. She was disciplining, why was the behavior changing? And I'd interact with her and I'd watch, and I'd realize she'd just confiscate a thing or spank the child or yell at the child and then not say why. The why was never articulated. It was always just, I'm angry at you now, so I'm going to do something you don't like. and the child is never figuring out what the cause was for this effect. And I just had to tell her, the kid's never gonna learn if it's, from the kid's perspective, these are just random bouts of anger. It's not, you're not doing anything to explain why the child is receiving this punishment.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And these points of discipline are points of opportunity to teach. And so the why, we can talk about the principles of the Lord and why it needs to adjust our behavior.
Well, we were blessed. Our kids were very good for the most part. Don't look at me. No, seriously though, it's like people have said, what works for one does not work for the other. And so you have to understand the child very well. We were really blessed. They were overall very good children. And so, but when you talk about correction and explaining to them why what they did was wrong, they learn, they grow, and hopefully they don't repeat again.
Comments, questions?
Just say,
Maybe talk a little bit about how you balance building a relationship with your child, positive, relationship, and then balancing that with discipline, and how that might change as the child ages too, and how disciplining changes. Not just because they're looking down at you, but maybe
Yeah.
just how you're preparing them for good.
Right,
How that changes.
right. Well, one of the most important things, I think, in disciplining your children, whatever that involves, whether it's just a good talking to or some kind of corporal punishment or, some restriction or whatever when they've misbehaved, they need to understand at the end of the day they haven't done anything that causes you to love them less. In fact, you need to make sure that they understand you love them more. You also need to praise when they make positive changes. Julie may end up hearing this, I don't know, but Julie was very strong-willed, and she knew how to verbalize her feelings very well, particularly toward her mother. And she and I would have conversations about that. Well, as I saw that changing in her, sometimes when I saw her act the right way toward her mom, I'd just find a time to pull her aside and say, "You remember this afternoon when this happened? Yeah. And the way you handled the situation? That's how I really want you to handle it. And I'm so thankful that you've changed the way you deal with your mom." And so, again, these are teachable moments, and these conversations are so important, and they need to be rooted in the things of the Lord. And so, and it does change over time. Little children, it's very difficult to reason with them like you're going to reason with them when they're 10, 12, 13 years old. And so there is a shift in the way things go. But I'll tell you, if you do the work on the front end when they're 1, 2, 3 years old, it'll make 10, 11, 12 so much easier. So much easier. One of the things that I've told every one of my children was that there are times when we can be little boys and little girls. There are times when we have to be little men and little women. And you need to figure out when those times are. Going into a funeral home, stop and talk to my boys, and I'd say, this is one of those times when we have to be young men. We're not going to be boys inside this funeral home. We're going to be young men. And we go in. Come to the church building. This is a time for us to be young men, young women.
Bill, Blanche Moody gave me some very good advice one time. She and Arthur had invited us to dinner when they moved here. And I remember sitting my boys down before we went and told them, I said, now we're going to the Moody's and it will be, formal. I said, and this is how you are to behave. And she and I had that conversation. She said, your children will behave the way you expect them to if you just talk to them about that.
Yeah.
And that, I knew that before, but it stuck more with me. And because people will say, well, I can't take my child here and I can't take my child here. And I said, yes, you can. I said, those are teaching moments.
They just need to know the expectations. Yeah. And when they don't meet the expectations, you deal with it accordingly. But, you know, yeah, I think it's great. Blanche is Nan's mom. And we learned a lot from both sides of our families with our parents. Okay. We would have a conversation, particularly when our kids were very young. We'd have a conversation every time we walked in the door at the building. We're getting ready to go in here. This is a place where we're still, we're quiet, and we're respectful because we're going to be before God. And so you're going to sit down, you're going to be still, you're going to be quiet. And then they wouldn't be. And we would take them out and deal with it. And our rule was we like to sit right up on the front. Our thing was we're going to sit up front. But when the kid acts up, we're going to take him out. And then when we come back in, we're going to sit in the back because we're not going to interrupt coming all the way back to the front. And when that happens, whatever small privileges they would have, be it writing on something or looking at a book, and we would limit that considerably. But whatever that privilege was, got lost when we had to sit in the back. And so there was desire was, let's sit up front and behave because we get to keep the privilege, right? Just little things like that. It may or may not work for you, but it seemed to work for us. Yeah. Other comments, questions? All right. I know we're going a little long here. We don't have that much more to go. I can't read that. What are the spiritual goals for your children, girls and boys? That is very important. Where do you want your children to be when they grow up? Obviously, we would say, oh, we want them to be a Christian. Yeah, but what are your goals for them? What are you setting before them as something that they want to achieve in life? What would that be for boys?
Strong spiritual leaders for their families in the future.
Very good. Yeah. They need to hear that from you. They don't need to learn that after they get married. They need to hear it from mom and dad. It needs to be a part of the process of raising those children, doesn't it? What else for boys? Providers? Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Strong work ethic. Don't be lazy. And that's a problem in teenage years. Sometimes in teenage years, kids get lazy, and we need to help them through that. What else for boys?
So in Deuteronomy, the passage that we open with is letting them know that they need to be close to the Lord. He tells them in this land of idolatry that the separation isn't going to be because the Lord doesn't love them. It is because these things they have not eliminated from the land are snares.
Mm-hmm.
And snares. So, love to be able to have a recognition of what was snared.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. What was your comment?
Elders and leaders.
Yeah. I think we should put before our young boys that one day, you should plan to be an elder or a deacon in the Lord's church. Something that's becoming a little bit more of a problem, I think Byron can probably speak to this, is that we don't have a whole lot of young men coming up that want to be preachers. Got to encourage that. We didn't necessarily encourage our boys to be preachers, but one thing I did do was I told both the boys about the time they were probably 10, 12 years old, there was a lot of Hispanics that moved into the area. And I mean, the influx was just really great at that time. And I told the boys, I said, you really need to be able to teach the gospel in 2 languages to people. Because you're going to be around more and more Spanish-speaking people, and if you don't have a way to communicate with them and teach them the gospel in their own language, then you're going to be handicapped. Joel was in the 8th grade at that time. I didn't know it, but basically he decided in the 8th grade that he wanted to preach the gospel in 2 languages, Spanish and English, and that's why he's in Puerto Rico today. He made that decision. I didn't specifically say, Joel, you need to be a preacher, but I did say you ought to be able to teach the gospel in 2 languages, and he took that and took it to the point of preaching the gospel. Both boys grew up to be capable public speakers, and those are the things that we should work on in our young men, because they are our replacements. What about girls?
Daughter,
What's that?
I taught my daughter that she should not know the Bible less than her husband, and that she should be equally strong in the scriptures, because I pointed out that her mother, knowing the scriptures, was able to slow me down when I was sinning and stop. And that I've heard too many young women say, well, I don't agree with my husband, but he's the spiritual head of the family, and I always do what he does. And I challenged one of the young ladies. I said, so if he's sinning, and he's the spiritual head of the family, are you supposed to go along with it? How will you be judged on the day of judgment? It will be judged on what you did and what you thought. And I think we need to stress to our young women, it's important for you to know the scriptures as well, maybe even better, than your husband.
Right.
Especially when you talk about raising children, because they do end up with most of the teaching responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And where I learned that was when I was like Joe, not raised in a Christian home, and I thought I knew the Bible, and I came home reading 1st, 2nd Chronicles, Isaiah, and she said to me one day, and I never forgot it, you've never really read that. I bought the King James Bible and I read it cover to cover. It wasn't very good because I didn't understand chronology, but it took a woman who did not grow up in a Christian household to shame someone who did. And so I really think it's important to stress to girls that you need to know that.
Yeah. Some of the greatest influences in my life have been women. My mother, for one, obviously, but I can think of several women in the church, older women, who came to me and talked with me about something they thought I ought to change. And I don't know how I would have received that from a man, but I received it very well from these older women. And then my wife has made such a difference in me, and her insight in the scriptures has been extremely helpful to me. I love it. It's unfortunate that she hasn't been able to go to Michigan with me the several times I've been up there recently, or in the last few years. The first time we went was great because she was with me. She's such a big help because while I'm doing some teaching or whatever, she's observing. She sees what's going on, and she'll come to me and she'll say, this point you made was good, but I'm not sure that so-and-so over here really understood that all that well, and you might want to go back to that at some point. I mean, it's teamwork is what it is, and it's so helpful. And so we need to teach our daughters that they need to know the Lord. They need to know His will. They need to be spiritually strong because they're going to be a huge help to their husband in the service to the Lord. Other things?
I was going to say, in terms of spiritual goals, outside of just men and women's different roles in life, both in the family and the church, outside of those, I really kind of see the goals almost very similar, very almost the same. In addition, a couple others that kind of came to my mind for both learning to love to serve, serving your brothers and sisters, and teaching them that even at an early age, in little things, even just the small things.
Right.
Another big one that I think is
guys were talking about the importance of dating and finding a mate. I thought a lot about just, in my coming up and dating and what I saw in friends and even as an adult, what I've seen in people. I'll tell you that it really almost seems like as much discussion, as much maybe maturity as can be, you still get blind, and you really until you're married, you don't people can tell you, but you really just don't know what it's like to be married. You don't understand. You hear it, but you don't get to fully grasp just how influential a mate is, just how important. And I know people in here who are not married are hearing that and going, yeah. I'm telling you, even until you do, you don't.
Yeah.
And so we're really trying to get our children to understand that importance. Dating and picking a mate early. Just, even if they can just get 25%, of having them understand it so that they can be set up to make a good decision.
Yeah. Yeah. And in both our boys and girls, we need to teach them how to say no to sin, especially in the realm of dating. I mean, it's an anything goes world out there now. I thought it was anything goes when I came along, and it's.
In a way, when I think about teenage years and growing up, it feels a lot like, especially when you become a teenager. And when you're young and you make decisions, you might burn your hand, okay, whatever, on the stove, or out. But when you're a teenager, you can make decisions there because you're starting to get some freedom and some decision-making accountability. You can really negatively impact the rest of
That's
your
right.
life. And that could be a very long time. So I've always used it now. It feels like a lot of times as a teenager, you're walking through a minefield. You don't really know as a teenager. You might know that there's lines that you don't know really where they are.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know where your next step is really occur. I think that back to this, parents in a way, they kind of know where the lines are. And you can kind of guide them, that's a huge important, teach them how to say no to sin. Don't step there. Don't, because that one's going to get you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important. And as someone said, left to their own devices, you're asking them to walk through this minefield alone with very little knowledge of what's out there.
Yeah. Very good point, Jesse.
I think this applies to sons and daughters, but one of the things that I want to do with our marriage is set expectations for my children. This is what you should expect in a godly man and a godly husband. This is what you should expect in a godly wife and mother. So look for these characteristics in somebody that you would, interview for that role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a heavy burden to bear as a parent. Like, this could be setting them up for a happy marriage and a happy family for their own lives. If you don't see it, then you're not going to look for it, or you may not. And I want my boys to know the differences between men and women, and it's not fair to expect your wife to carry that. So you need to go and be a gentleman. Train them in all of those things. And as a lady, you should expect that and have those expectations of the different roles and respect it and appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good points. Anything else? All right. This is just brief. Public school, private school, homeschool. I don't think it really matters. The decision you need to make is how you're going to effectively control outside influences on your children.
You can't.
Huh?
You can't always.
Well, you can't always, but you can exert a lot of control over that. And you have to. I remember a young man that my son was friends with. He was a little older than Joel, and he was in the neighborhood. And we began to realize that he was having a really negative influence on Joel. And we told Joel that that relationship was going to have to be cut off. And he protested, and I said, I'm not asking you to do anything I haven't already done. My best friend in high school I had to cut off the relationship with because of the sin he got himself into. And so, don't tell me I don't understand. I do. I gave up my best friend in high school. And so, we have to make those decisions, but we've got to control those outside influences. Well, I won't go into that. It's a long story. Any comment on that, Joe?
One quick thing. For all your parents, Melissa's mother suggested a book back about 5 months ago. I bought that book called The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. It's not written by a Christian. Written by an atheist, a psychiatrist, but he has a lot of data to show that giving children cell phones before 16 and allowing them unfettered access to the internet is causing a lot of problems. And the data shows that it's really gone up since the smartphone came along. I think when you talk about outside influences, the outside influences might be in your house.
Yeah.
It might be in your child's hand.
That's a very good point.
Really got to dig into that. And he recommends not getting them one until they're 16. He actually says it would be better if they didn't have it until they were 18. And
When they can buy their own, right?
what's that?
When they can buy their own.
When they can buy their own. But, I thought about it. I thought I knew how to advise on that, but our children were out, but still had flip phones, didn't have the access to a smart.
Right.
And I really feel like even if you homeschool, there's still outside influence, and you may be letting it in through the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point.
Did either of you, as your children began dating and this kind of thing, did you ever have, you mentioned about having to get rid of a friend, but did you ever have to involve negatively in their dating? Maybe say they're dating someone that you know is a no. Did you ever have to get negatively involved, and if so, how? Or do you have any? And Joe, I know that might be hard since your kids are here.
I'm telling all.
Mark, it was terrible.
He was dropped on his head as a child. He likes Whataburger. For us, we did not have to really tell her about people's character so much. For Marley. Obviously, she being 4 years older than her sister, boys started coming around earlier for her.
I like the way you said that. Boys started coming around.
And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. We'd go visit places and things like that, and she had a network of friends and things of that nature. And we'd let her hang out with people. And so often after the first time or second time they hung out, they wouldn't really call it a date. She would just come home and kind of shake her head, he's not the one, and show no further interest in it. And so it happened several times. She was very picky. So we were very fortunate in that regard. In Brittany, she really didn't experience the same situation. She found Nathan pretty early and kind of had her sights set on him for I don't know how long. But they were very wise in their choices. We didn't have to really coach them much because it started at a young age, like everything else. You teach them the characteristics, like Jesse said earlier, this is what you're looking for in a guy. And they would scrutinize them. they figured out what they were looking for in a guy that was a potential mate. They didn't date for the sake of dating. It was, you know, who am I going to spend my life with? And so, and I'm very thankful that they chose who they did.
Talking about it early, long before dating age, I think is very important. Set some of those expectations, and that'll serve you well when they do get to that point. We're running kind of long here, so do you think of other things that we haven't talked about? I don't want to. All right. One question I've got here is: are you willing to make every? We've got here is: are you willing to make every sacrifice necessary to fulfill your commitment? You know, you hear this all the time. You only got your kids once, and I mean it's true. You don't realize how fast that time with your children goes away. I mean, yeah, you only have them once, but if you're not actively working on bringing those children along, they're going to be 18 before you know it and gone. It just happens so fast. And just a bad example of that, or not a bad example, but a non-teaching example, is we had always planned to take this trip out west. The whole family, go out there and just see everything. Yellowstone, Bryce Canyon, all those things. You know, we're going to take this long vacation to go out there. Suddenly, Joel's graduating from high school in 9 months, and we haven't taken our trip. And so I said, Nan, I said, hey, we haven't taken the trip. She said, well, you better get it planned. So I started working on the plans. Joel gets a call in March from Huey Hartzell in Alabama, and he's asked to come down and go into a preacher training program down there. Next thing I know, the day Joel's leaving to go to the preacher training program is the day after he graduates from high school. So we didn't get to take the trip. We didn't get to take that trip together as a family until 2015. Joel graduated in 2000. That's how fast the time goes with your children. Realize that you have them now and take advantage of these days you have, because they will be gone quickly and then they're on their own. You can offer some advice, but they're making their decisions by the time they get out, and it happens fast. So
I thought, which is stupid, but I thought when we were 18, we could go, okay. No, you're gonna be the parent forever.
yeah.
And if you never get out of that changes. But you can draw upon what you did is you disciplined them, right? A lot of what comes in today, very interesting, because influence and so on. That's all part of discipline.
Yeah.
You want your child to grow, but they cannot, this is just my opinion. Experience. Nice. Children need to not only grow, they get to thrive. And they have to have structure. And that is all part of that discipline. They've got to have boundaries, know what those are.
Yeah.
And if they know what the boundaries are, they'll test them. Talk about, discipline early on. Our first two, boy, little girl, most of the time Josh and Stephanie got in trouble at the same time because it was something they were doing against each other. So they came in together. I pulled out the Bible. They knew what was coming. I'd read a passage about disciplining children. So look, God tells me that I'm going to do this, and that is behind everything that we do in this family. The time I got through reading the scripture, they were both crying. So I didn't have to do much with him kind of spanking. I would, and I did, but they were already just boo-hooing and crazy. goes on after they're out of the house.
Yeah.
You know, you're right, that you can get advice. A lot of times I get questions, you know, and sometimes it's like, well, what? I say, well, what's your husband saying?
Mm-hmm.
Which I want to go and say, well, this is what you need.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's where, you know, I can get some advice, maybe,
Sure.
but you're always going to be.
Yeah, that's right. All right. I think we've probably talked a lot about that already, but you look at that pie chart, God's the majority of our life, right? So what you're saying is it should look like this. You see, when God is part of my life, there's competition between my family, my work, and my fun, and whatever else you want to put on in that pie chart. There's competition between that and God. But when God is my life, then all these other things fall underneath, and He controls all of that. He's over all of that. And so there is no competition between my job and God. I'm going to make the decisions in my work environment and what I do and the time I spend with it based upon what God has told me. Our hobbies, our fun, the recreation, whatever it is we're involved in, all of that is going to be underneath the umbrella of God's instructions, and I will balance that accordingly. Now, will we make mistakes? Yes, we'll make mistakes, but we need to realize that we're not living a pie chart, we're living this umbrella where God is over all things. I got this concept from a Muslim, and he said that this is the difference between Christians on the right and Muslims on the left. That's his view. He says Christians consider God to be a part of their life while the Muslim considers God to be their entire life, and He's over all. We need to adopt not the Muslim view, but the Lord's view that He is indeed over all of our life. The vision for our family, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. That's a statement by the Apostle John when he was an old man. I don't think he was necessarily talking about his kids. He was talking about his children in the faith, but the application is still there. I will tell you that it is such a blessing to have my adult children walking in the Lord. They are some of my very best friends. But my children weren't my friends until they became adults. They were my children. And I love them and I appreciate them for who they are. And all glory to God for that. And a lot of that is my wife. What would you change if you could? It was funny. Joe and I came up with the same two things. One is we would have spent more time with our family and less time at work. Something that occurred to me too late was that even if I died of a heart attack and was gone, the company would go on without me. They always do. A friend of ours who was a bank, he was an executive VP in one of the big banks here in town, gone just like that one day. And the bank didn't skip a beat. They just kept on doing what they do. And it made me realize that my company would go on without me because I'd done my job and I'd trained capable people. But if I was going to spend all my time and energy there and have little time for my family, then I was going to miss out on the best part of life, And so one of my regrets, and Joe shared this earlier, and it's what we agreed on, or what we came to when we were talking about this, is that we would have spent far less time at work and more time with our families. So that's advice. The second thing is that we would have expressed our love and appreciation for our wives more often than we did for what they did. The house that Josh and Suzanne live in now used to be our house, and I forget what year it was, but we had an ice maker line break in that kitchen up there, and it flooded the entire downstairs, and we were having all that work done, and the guy called me up and he said, "Hey, I forgot to measure the linoleum area inside your washer and dryer area. Would you measure that for me and tell me what it is?" So I went down there, got on my hands and knees to measure that out because it's kind of hard to get around the washer and the dryer. And as I'm down there on my hands and knees, I look, and the linoleum has this really worn spot in it. And that worn spot is actually two spots, and it's in the shape of 2 feet. And the reason the linoleum was worn there like that was because of the hours that Nan had spent at the washer and dryer taking care of our family's laundry. So many hours that there were 2 impressions of her feet on the floor in the linoleum where it had worn away. And I got very emotional because I didn't think to that point I had ever told my wife that I appreciated the time she spent doing our laundry. Is doing laundry a big deal? Well, it's kind of important in the house, right? But you take it for granted, men. In our house, I just didn't do the laundry. She did, and she never asked me to do it. And she never once complained about doing laundry. All those years for a family of 6. And I went upstairs, and I said, "I have to apologize to you." She said, "For what?" And I took her downstairs, and I showed her those 2 footprints. Told her how much of her life had to have been spent there to cause that to happen. And I told her that I loved her and that I was sorry that I had never said thank you. And she just said, "Thanks." You know, I was just doing what I needed to do as a wife, but I hadn't appreciated her like I should.
Well, for me, very much the same sentiments that Bill just expressed. And one of the things I would have done different in raising the kids, I would have asked myself, how many hours will I have to work to pay for this expenditure? How much time will this take me away from my family? How much time will it take from me serving others? How much time would it take away from serving God? So when you have decisions in life to make, my advice, consider those factors. What it does, what it robs you of, the things that the choices you make. And for the men, husbands, providers out there who are working long hours, and, it's your responsibility to do it, true. But like Bill said, remember and rejoice in the wife of your youth. Appreciate the many years that she has quietly shown herself to be shown like the woman in Proverbs 31.
Yeah.
At the memorial service, Byron read that passage for us, and it really strikes to the heart how valuable your wife is. So don't ever forget that, guys.
That might be a good place to end, but I guess we should ask if there are any questions that anybody has about anything we haven't covered. Thank you for coming. God bless you in your commitment to the Lord and your family. And let's make a difference in this world by making sure our children are brought up in His ways and carry on the future. Joe and I realize more and more how quickly the generation in front of us has gone away, and we're not too far behind. And you folks, you younger folks, are the ones stepping in, and then your kids will be behind you. Lord somehow turned it over to us to perpetuate His cause. It's amazing to me that He would give humans that responsibility, but He did. And He believes we can do it. We just need to set ourselves to the task. Other comments? Thank you for your time.
So glad you took the time to study with us. If this lesson encouraged you, please like, comment, and share the video to help more people find God's Word. Thanks for watching.